The laughter started before Ambassador Daniel Okonkwo could even rise from his seat. It echoed through the galactic conclave chamber like thunder, rolling from one alien delegation to another. The Varani clicked their scaled throats in amusement. The Meredith hummed their deep bass mockery. Even the usually silent Dothrani made wet, bubbling sounds that passed for joy among their kind. High Arbiter Solis, his golden reptilian eyes gleaming with satisfaction, raised one clawed hand for silence. The sentence is final, Solis announced. For humanity's continued defiance of fair trade protocols, for their refusal to accept their proper place among lesser civilizations, the Conclave hereby assigns all 4.6 million Dravari refugees to Earth. Permanently. More laughter, more clicking and humming. Daniel stood slowly. His translator device worked overtime, converting the alien sounds into meaning. Every species in this chamber considered this the ultimate punishment. The Dravari were wanderers, survivors of a dead world, rejected by every civilization for 18 months. They had nothing. They needed everything. And the Conclave believed that dumping millions of desperate refugees on a small, struggling planet would finally break humanity's spirit. We accept, Daniel said. The laughter died. Solis leaned forward, his neck scales flaring. You accept? Without negotiation? Without protest? We accept, Daniel repeated. When do they arrive? For the first time in recorded galactic history, the conclave chamber fell completely silent. 300,000 light-years away. Aboard a ship called Hope's Burden, a young Dravari named Null pressed his four hands against the cold viewing window. His pale skin reflected the blue glow of the planet growing larger before him. Earth, he had heard the stories. A death world, a place where the gravity crushed bones, where predators hunted in every environment, where even the plants could kill. The humans who lived there had evolved through constant violence, their bodies hardened by a planet that showed no mercy. And now, Null's people were being sent there as punishment. His grandmother Shira sat behind him, too weak to stand. The journey had nearly killed her. 18 months of rationed food, recycled water, and sleeping in shifts had broken something inside her. She coughed constantly now, a wet sound that filled Null with dread. What do you see? Shira asked. Null studied the planet. Blue oceans, green and brown land, white clouds swirling in patterns. It looked almost peaceful from here. Almost beautiful. I see our grave, he whispered. That on Earth. The news spread within hours. Secretary General Amira Hassan stood before the United Nations Emergency Assembly, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. Representatives shouted over each other. Some demanded rejection of the refugees. Others called for immediate military preparation. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Enough, Amira said, and the room quieted. 4.6 million souls are coming to our world. They have lost their home. They have been rejected by every civilization in the galaxy. And now they have been thrown at us like garbage, because the Conclave believes we will treat them the same way everyone else has. She paused, letting her words settle. They expect us to fail. They expect us to turn cruel. They expect us to prove that Earth is exactly the death world they believe it to be. Amira looked around the chamber, meeting eyes from every nation. I say we prove them wrong. The vote passed by a narrow margin. Humanity would accept the refugees, not with weapons drawn, but with hands extended. 3 weeks later, the first ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Null watched through a tiny porthole as the vessel shook and groaned. Fire licked the edges of the window. The heat inside the cabin rose until sweat dripped from his pale skin. Around him, thousands of Dravari cried out in terror, certain they were being burned alive. Then the fire stopped. The shaking eased. And below them, a city appeared. Null had expected military formations. He had expected armed guards and chains and cages. Every other civilization had greeted them with weapons. Instead, he saw people, thousands of them, standing in fields, holding signs in languages he could not read. Waving, the ship landed with a heavy thud, and the doors opened. Null helped Shira to her feet, supporting her weight as they shuffled toward the exit. The air that rushed in was thick and warm, filled with strange smells. That a human woman stood at the base of the ramp. She had dark skin and tired eyes and a smile that seemed too soft for a deathworlder. She held a blanket in her hands. Welcome to Earth, she said, her voice translated by a small device on her collar. "My name is Ruth. Are you hungry?" Null did not answer. He could not answer. In 18 months of wandering, no one had ever asked if they were hungry. No one had offered warmth. No one had smiled. Ruth wrapped the blanket around Shira's thin shoulders. "It is all right," Ruth said gently. "You are safe now." Shira began to weep. Null stood frozen, watching as more humans approached with blankets, with food, with water. They moved among his people not as guards, but as helpers. They lifted children. They supported the elderly. They asked nothing in return. Somewhere far above, aboard a conclave observation vessel, monitors recorded everything. They transmitted the footage back to Station Meridian, where High Arbiter Solis watched with growing confusion. This was not how the punishment was supposed to work. Humans were supposed to reject the refugees. They were supposed to collapse under the burden. They were supposed to prove that compassion was weakness. Instead, they handed out blankets and asked if anyone was hungry. Solis turned away from the screen, his scales rippling with unease. Perhaps, he thought, this had been a mistake. Shira had not seen medicine given freely in 30 years that on her homeworld, before the star died. Healers charged by the hour. In the refugee ships, medicine was rationed to those who could work. Every civilization they had begged for shelter had made the same calculation. Treat only those who could produce value. Now a human doctor named Ruth pressed a small device against Shira's chest and frowned with concern. "Your lungs have fluid," Ruth said through her translator. "We can drain it. The procedure takes 1 hour. You will feel much better after." Shira's 4 hands trembled. "What is the cost?" "There is no cost." "Then what must I do in return? What labor? What service?" Ruth knelt beside the old woman's bed, her dark eyes soft. "Nothing. You are sick. We help sick people. That is all." Shira began to cry again. 6 weeks on Earth, and she still could not understand these strange, terrifying, beautiful creatures. Across the planet, humanity moved like a single organism with 4 billion cells that in Geneva. Processing centers worked through the night. Volunteers from 40 countries sorted clothing, prepared meals, and learned basic Dravari phrases. In Sao Paulo, Captain Leo Ferreira commanded a logistics operation larger than any military campaign in Brazilian history. Trucks carried supplies to refugee camps. Planes dropped food to remote settlements. Ships ferried medical equipment across oceans. And in Mumbai, a young Dravari named Null stood in a crowd of thousands, clutching a paper ticket with a number he could not read. He had been separated from Shira during processing. The humans had tried to explain, waving their arms and pointing at buildings, but Null understood nothing. He only knew that his grandmother was somewhere in this massive city of noise and heat and strange smells, and he could not find her. Panic rose in his chest. His 4 arms wrapped around himself as the crowd pressed closer. Human faces surrounded him, speaking words his translator could not process fast enough. They were so loud, so large. Their teeth showed when they talked. Null began to hyperventilate. A hand touched his shoulder. He flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, he found a human man with sun-darkened skin and kind eyes. The man wore a green vest with words Null could not read. He spoke slowly, waiting for the translator to catch up. "Lost someone?" the man asked. Null nodded, unable to speak. "Family." Another nod. The man smiled, and Null forced himself not to run. He had learned that human smiles were not threats. He had learned this, but his instincts still screamed danger when he saw their teeth. "My name is Leo," the man said. "Come with me. We will find them." For 3 hours, Leo walked Null through the processing center. He checked lists. He made calls on a small device. He bought Null food from a vendor and laughed when Null tried to eat the wrapper. Finally, near sunset, they found Shira. She was lying in a medical tent, an oxygen mask over her face. But she was awake. She was alive. And when she saw Null, her 4 arms reached for him. Null collapsed beside her bed, clutching her hands, weeping with relief. Leo stood at the tent entrance, watching. Ruth appeared beside him, wiping her hands on a cloth. "You found him," Ruth said. "He was terrified," Leo replied. "They all are. They expect us to hurt them." Ruth nodded slowly. 18 months of rejection. Every species they met treated them like parasites. They do not know what to do with kindness. Then we teach them. Outside the medical tent, the sun set over Mumbai. The The sky turned orange and pink. Dravari refugees gathered in clusters, eating human food, wrapped in human blankets, surrounded by human volunteers who asked nothing in return. And in orbit above Earth, a conclave observation vessel transmitted another report. The senior monitor, a Varani named Keth, reviewed the footage with growing disbelief. He had expected riots by now. He had expected the humans to run out of resources and turn violent. He had expected the natural order to assert itself. Instead, he watched humans carry Dravari children on their shoulders. He watched human doctors work double shifts to treat alien patients. He watched human families open their homes to complete strangers. This makes no sense, Keth muttered. They gain nothing from this. The refugees cannot repay them. They cannot work. They cannot produce. This is pure waste. His assistant, a younger Varani, studied the data streams. Perhaps the humans expect future payment? From what? The Dravari have nothing. Their world is dead. Their species has no value to the galactic economy. Then why help them? Keth had no answer. He recorded his confusion in the official report and sent it to High Arbiter Solis. He added a note at the bottom, something he had never written in 30 years of service. I do not understand these creatures. Back on Earth, in a small medical tent in Mumbai, Nal sat beside his grandmother's bed. Ruth had removed the oxygen mask. Shira was breathing easier now, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The human, Shira whispered. The one who found you. What did he want? Nal thought about Leo. About the hours he had spent searching. About the food he had shared. About the smile that had seemed, against all instinct, genuine. Nothing, Nal said. He wanted nothing. Shira closed her eyes. A tear slid down her pale cheek. What kind of species, she breathed, helps strangers and asks for nothing? Nal looked out through the tent flap. Humans moved through the camp, carrying supplies, leading refugees, laughing with children who had never known safety. I do not know, he admitted, but I think I want to find out. The fight started over a soccer ball. Covey had not meant to cause trouble. The 17-year-old Dravari had simply wanted to play. He had watched the human teenagers kicking the ball across a dusty field in the Polish settlement for weeks, studying their movements, learning the rules. When the ball rolled toward him one afternoon, he picked it up with 2 of his 4 hands and tried to join. The human boys did not want him there. Words were exchanged. Words became shoves. And when one of the boys pushed Covey to the ground and called him something the translator refused to process, Covey swung with all 4 arms. 3 humans went down before the others pulled him off. Now Covey sat in a small office, his pale skin marked with bruises, his heart's pounding with fear. He knew what came next. He had seen it on every world. Fighting meant punishment. Punishment meant beatings or starvation or being thrown out into the cold. The door opened, and a human woman entered. She was small, with light brown hair and glasses that made her eyes look too large. She carried 2 cups of something warm. She sat across from Covey and slid 1 cup toward him. Tea, she said. It helps. Covey stared at the cup. You are not here to punish me. I am here to talk. My name is Nina. I teach at the school here. I hurt 3 humans. You defended yourself after being attacked and insulted. Nina sipped her tea. I watched the whole thing from my window. Those boys started it. Covey did not understand. On the refugee ships, it did not matter who started fights. The refugees were always punished. Always. What happens now? He asked. Nina set down her cup. Now we fix this. Those boys will apologize. You will apologize. And then I think you should join the soccer team. For months had passed since the refugees arrived, and the cracks were starting to show. In a small town in Senegal, Mayor Ibrahim Diallo stood before a crowd of angry humans. They waved signs. They shouted demands. The Dravari were taking jobs. The Dravari were taking food. The Dravari were strange and different and did not belong. Ibrahim let them shout. He had been shouted at before. When the crowd finally quieted, he spoke. My grandfather was a refugee, Ibrahim said. He fled war when he was 7 years old. He walked for 200 miles with nothing but the clothes on his back. A village took him in. They fed him. They taught him. They made him one of their own. He looked across the crowd, meeting their eyes. That village was this village. My grandfather became your neighbor. His children became your friends. And now you stand here, forgetting what we are. The crowd shifted. Some looked at the ground. The Dravari are afraid. Ibrahim continued. They have lost everything. They expect us to hurt them, to reject them, to prove that every species in the galaxy is the same. And some of you want to prove them right. He pointed toward the refugee settlement at the edge of town. I say we prove them wrong. I am starting a partnership program. One Dravari family, one human family. Working together, learning together, building together. Anyone who wants to help, come see me tomorrow. 73 families signed up by noon. In Poland, Covey joined the soccer team. It was awkward at first. The human players did not know how to include someone with 4 arms. The rules had to be adjusted. Arguments broke out over what counted as a handball when the player had 4 hands. But slowly, game by game, something changed. Covey was fast. His 4 arms gave him incredible balance. He could fake a direction change that left defenders spinning. And when he scored his first goal, his human teammates lifted him on their shoulders and cheered. One of the boys who had fought him, a teenager named Powell, became his closest friend. I am sorry, Powell said one evening after practice, for what I called you, for starting the fight. I was scared of you. Covey tilted his head. Scared? I am smaller than you. You are different. Different is scary. Powell kicked at the grass. But you are also really good at soccer. And you laugh at my jokes. And you help me with my math homework even though you could barely read the problems. So maybe different is not so bad. In Geneva, Shira had recovered enough to walk without help. She spent her days in a community center, surrounded by human children who wanted to learn about the Dravari homeworld. Tell us about the flowers. A little girl named Else begged. Shira smiled, her 4 hands folded in her lap. Our flowers sang, she said. When the wind blew, they made music. Every field was a symphony. The children gasped with wonder, and Shira felt something she had not felt in 18 months. She felt useful. She felt valued. She felt like more than a burden to be discarded. High above Earth, the conclave monitors continued their observations. The reports grew more confusing by the week. Protests had occurred, yes. Fights had broken out. But the humans kept trying. They kept adjusting. They kept choosing to build rather than destroy. High Arbiter Solis read the latest report and threw it across his desk. Impossible, he hissed. No species absorbs this many refugees without collapse. No civilization shares resources with strangers. This defies every principle of natural selection. His advisor shifted nervously. Perhaps, High Arbiter, we underestimated them. Solis turned, his golden eyes burning. We underestimated nothing. They will fail. They must fail. Nature demands it. But on Earth, human and Dravari children played soccer together, and an old woman told stories about singing flowers, and slowly, carefully, 2 species learned that different was not so bad after all. The cure came from bioluminescence. Dravari skin contained special cells that glowed faintly in the dark. It was a remnant of their evolution, a way to communicate in the deep caves of their lost homeworld. Scientists had studied it for months, curious but unsure of its practical value. Then Dr. Ruth Adeyemi made a discovery. The proteins in Dravari bioluminescent cells could bind to certain human cancer markers. With the right modifications, they could light up tumors that traditional scans missed. Suddenly, early detection became possible for diseases that had killed millions. Ruth stood before a press conference, flanked by Dravari researchers who had contributed to the breakthrough. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. And somewhere in the crowd, Nal washed with tears in his eyes. 14 months ago, his people had arrived as punishment, as burdens, as proof of humanity's weakness. Now they were saving human lives. Everything had changed. Nal worked as a translator now, helping new Dravari arrivals navigate human systems. He had learned English, Spanish, and bits of a dozen other languages. His tablet was full of contacts from government agencies, medical facilities, and community organizations. He knew which shelters had the best food, which doctors spoke slowly enough for translation devices, which neighborhoods welcomed his people most warmly. That he had become, without intending to, a bridge between 2 worlds. One evening, he visited Shira in her small apartment near the Geneva Community Center. She had decorated it with paintings from human children, drawings of her lost homeworld, and photographs of friends she had made. You look tired, Shira said, pressing a cup of tea into his hands. The work never stops. Nal settled into a chair. Every day, more questions, more problems, more people who need help. But you help them. I try. Shira smiled, her four hands folded peacefully. Do you remember what you said when we first saw Earth? Through the ship's window, Nal remembered. The fear, the certainty of death. I said I saw our grave. And now, he looked around the apartment, at the children's artwork, at the photographs, at his grandmother, healthy and happy for the first time in years. Now I see our home. Across the planet, the integration continued. Covey had become a youth leader in Poland, organizing sports leagues for mixed human and Dravari teams. He spoke at schools about cooperation and understanding. He still played soccer with Powell, who had become his best friend. In Senegal, Mayor Ibrahim's partnership program had spread to 30 other towns. Human and Dravari families worked farms together, built homes together, raised children together. The economy had not collapsed as critics predicted. It had grown. And in research facilities around the world, joint human Dravari teams were making discoveries that neither species could have achieved alone. The bioluminescence breakthrough was only the beginning. Then the message arrived. Ambassador Daniel Okonkwo received it in his office at the United Nations headquarters. The seal of the Galactic Conclave glowed on his screen. The text was brief. A delegation will arrive in 30 days to evaluate the status of the refugee assignment. Prepare full access to all settlement areas. Daniel read the message 3 times. Then he called Secretary General Amira Hassan. They are coming, he said. Amira's voice was calm. What do they want? They say evaluation. But we both know what they really want. They want to see us fail. They want evidence that their punishment worked. And if they find the opposite? Daniel thought about the medical breakthroughs, the growing economy, the children playing together in parks around the world. Then they will try to take the Dravari back, to sell them, or scatter them, or make an example of them. Amira was quiet for a long moment. What do you recommend? We tell them the truth. We show them everything. And we make one thing absolutely clear. What is that? The Dravari are not going anywhere. They are ours now. And we protect our own. Word spread quickly through the refugee communities. The conclave was coming. The masters of the galaxy, the ones who had rejected them, sentenced them, cast them away like garbage. They were coming to Earth. Fear returned like an old wound opening. In Geneva, Dravari families whispered about fleeing. In Poland, Covey found his teammates too scared to practice. In Senegal, children cried in their sleep, dreaming of ships that would take them away. Nal gathered a group of community leaders in a small conference room. Their faces were pale with terror. They will take us, one leader said. They will scatter us across the galaxy. Sell us to whoever bids highest. They will execute the elders, another added. They always eliminate the unproductive. Nal listened to their fears. He understood them. For 18 months, the conclave had defined their existence. The conclave was power. The conclave was law. The conclave was everything they could not escape. But that was before Earth. Listen to me, Nal said quietly. The humans did not accept us because they are weak. They accepted us because they are strong. Strong enough to choose compassion when the galaxy chose cruelty. He looked around the room, meeting their frightened eyes. And strong enough to protect us. You cannot know that, someone protested. When the conclave demands our return, the humans will surrender us. Everyone does. Nal shook his head. You have lived among them for 14 months. You have seen how they treat their sick, their elderly, their children. You have seen how they fight for strangers. He stood, his 4 hands pressed flat against the table. These people walked into fire to save each other. Do you really believe they will hand us over without a fight? The room was silent, and slowly, one by one, the fear in their eyes began to fade. High Arbiter Solis had expected ruins. His shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, and he pressed his scaled face against the window, searching for signs of collapse. He expected burning cities, starving crowds, human mobs attacking refugee camps. Instead, he saw green fields. He saw bustling ports. He saw children of 2 species playing in parks. His scales rippled with confusion. The shuttle landed at the United Nations complex in New York, where a formal delegation waited. Ambassador Daniel Okonkwo stood at the front, his posture straight, his face calm. Behind him stood Secretary General Amira Hassan and dozens of human officials. And among them, dressed in formal clothes that mixed human and Dravari styles, stood Nal. Solis stepped from the shuttle, his golden robes flowing behind him. His guards followed, their weapons visible. He had brought enough soldiers to intimidate any primitive species. High Arbiter, Daniel said, bowing slightly. Welcome to Earth. Solis did not return the bow. I am here to evaluate the status of the refugee assignment. You will provide full access to all settlement areas. Of course. But first, the General Assembly has prepared a presentation. Solis sneered. I did not come for presentations. I came for evidence. Then you will have it. The assembly hall was packed. Representatives from every nation filled the seats. Cameras broadcast to billions around the world. In the gallery, Dravari refugees sat beside human friends and neighbors, their pale faces tense with fear. Solis took his place at the center podium, surrounded by his delegation. He looked out at the gathered humans with barely hidden contempt. 18 months ago, Solis began. This body was sentenced to accept 4.6 million refugees as punishment for your arrogance. The conclave expected this burden to break you. We expected your primitive society to collapse under the weight of so many dependents. He paused, letting his words settle. I am here to confirm that collapse and to reclaim conclave property. A murmur ran through the hall. Dravari faces went pale. Amira Hassan rose from her seat. With respect, High Arbiter, the Dravari are not property. They are refugees, and they are now residents of Earth. Residents? Solis laughed, a harsh clicking sound. They are assigned resources. When the assignment fails, they return to conclave custody. The assignment has not failed. Impossible. No civilization absorbs millions of refugees without economic destruction. No species shares limited resources with strangers. Your failure is certain. Show me the evidence. Daniel stepped forward. He carried a tablet loaded with data. Very well, he said. Here is your evidence. The screens around the hall lit up. Charts showed Earth's economic growth over 18 months. Not decline. Growth. The Dravari had brought new perspectives, new skills, new labor. They had filled gaps in human industries. They had created art and music that humans loved. They had contributed to medical breakthroughs that were saving millions of lives. Impossible, Solis muttered. This data must be falsified. Daniel continued. Refugee integration rate, 94%. Employment rate among working-age Dravari, 78%. Educational enrollment among children, 99%. More charts. More numbers. All pointing to the same conclusion. The punishment had become a gift. Solis stood frozen, his golden eyes scanning the data. This was not how nature worked. This was not how civilizations functioned. Strong species took from the weak. That was the law of the galaxy. These numbers mean nothing, he finally said. The conclave assigned these refugees to your care. They remain conclave property. I demand their return. The hall fell silent. Then a voice spoke from the gallery. May I address the assembly? Everyone turned. Nal stood, his four hands trembling but his voice steady. He wore a translator device on his collar, and his words carried clearly through the massive chamber. Amira nodded. The floor recognizes Nal of the Dravari people. Nal walked slowly to the central podium. He stood a few feet from Solis, looking up at the towering Varani without flinching. High Arbiter, he said. 18 months ago, I watched Earth through a ship's window and believed I was seeing my grave. My people had been rejected by every civilization in the galaxy. We expected nothing different here. He turned to face the assembly. But we were wrong. The humans did not reject us. They did not cage us or starve us or sell us. They gave us blankets. They gave us medicine. They gave us homes. His voice grew stronger. They gave us hope. Nal looked back at Solis. You sent us here as punishment. You expected cruelty. But you do not understand these people. They are not cruel because they are weak. They are kind because they are strong. Strong enough to see strangers in need and choose to help. Strong enough to face the galaxy's contempt and refuse to break. He stepped forward, his pale face reflecting the chamber's lights. We are not your property. We are not your punishment. We are family now. And this family will not let you take us. Silence filled the hall. Then, from somewhere in the gallery, a human started clapping. Another joined. And another. Within moments, the entire assembly was on its feet, applauding. Solis stared at the crowd. At the humans and Dravari standing together. At the cameras broadcasting this moment to billions. He had come to witness failure. Instead, he witnessed something far more dangerous. He witnessed unity. Secretary General Amira Hassan approached the podium. Her voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. "You meant this as punishment," she said. "We made it a gift. The Dravari are not property. They are citizens. They are neighbors. They are ours." She met Solis's golden eyes without fear. "And we protect our own." The funeral procession stretched for miles. Shira had passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family and friends. She was 112 years old, ancient by Dravari standards, and she had spent her final years happier than she had ever imagined possible. Nal walked at the front of the procession, carrying a small box of her ashes. Beside him walked Covey, now a grown man with a family of his own. Behind them came thousands of mourners, human and Dravari alike, their faces wet with tears. They had chosen a hillside overlooking the ocean for the ceremony. It was Shira's favorite place on Earth. She had loved watching the waves, so different from the still lakes of her lost homeworld. A.S. Nal scattered her ashes into the wind. He thought about everything she had survived. The death of a star, 18 months of rejection, the terror of arriving on a death world, and 5 years of peace. 5 years of telling stories to children. 5 years of teaching human artists to paint Dravari flowers. 5 years of being loved. She had died knowing that her people were safe. There was no greater gift. The galaxy had changed since the day High Arbiter Solis left Earth in humiliation. His delegation had returned to Station Meridian with footage that spread across every civilized world. Humans and Dravari standing together. Cheering crowds. A single speech that made the most powerful being in the galaxy back down without a fight. For the first time in recorded history, the conclave looked weak. Other species began to ask questions. If Earth could absorb millions of refugees and thrive, why had the conclave said it was impossible? If humans could choose compassion, why were other civilizations forced to choose cruelty? The cracks spread slowly at first. A few trade disputes. Some border tensions. Nothing dramatic. Then the Morothi arrived. They were a small species, furry and quick, fleeing a plague that had killed half their population. The conclave had rejected them, just as they had rejected the Dravari. They had nowhere to go, so they came to Earth. 40,000 Morothi, crowded into ships held together with hope and prayer, dropped into Earth's atmosphere and asked for help. And Earth said yes. The integration was easier this time. Humanity had learned. The Dravari helped, sharing their experience with the newcomers. Within months, the Morothi were settling into communities, learning languages, contributing to society. Then came the Corvith. Then the Solani. Then a dozen other species, refugees and outcasts rejected by the galaxy's cruel masters. Earth became something new, something unprecedented. Earth became a sanctuary. Nal stood at a podium on the beach, 5 years after his grandmother's funeral, addressing a crowd of new arrivals. They were Veldran, a species of tall, thin beings with skin like polished stone. They had fled religious persecution, and they looked at the gathered humans and Dravari with the same fear Nal had once felt. "I know what you are thinking," Nal said. "You are thinking this is a trap. You are thinking these creatures will turn on you, just like everyone else. You are thinking that kindness is impossible." He paused, letting the translator devices work. "I thought the same thing. I watched Earth through a ship's window and saw my grave. I expected cruelty. I expected rejection. I expected to die." He spread his forearms wide, gesturing at the beach, the city, the diverse crowd. "Instead, I found home." Behind him, human and Dravari children played in the sand, chasing each other and laughing. Morothi vendors sold food from colorful carts. A group of Corvith musicians played instruments that sounded like singing rain. "The galaxy told us that compassion was weakness," Nal continued. "They told us that only the strong survive, and the strong take what they want. They built an empire on cruelty and called it natural law." He looked at the Veldran, meeting their stone-gray eyes. "But nature is not cruel. Nature is balanced. And sometimes, the strongest thing a species can do is choose to help instead of harm." Far above Earth, in the cold halls of Station Meridian, High Arbiter Solis watched the broadcast with darkening scales. His empire was fracturing. Every day, more species questioned the Conclave's authority. Every day, more refugees fled toward Earth. Every day, the simple act of human compassion undermined everything he had built. "They are destroying us," he hissed to his advisors. "Without firing a single weapon, they are destroying us." His chief advisor shifted nervously. Perhaps we should negotiate. Find common ground. There is no common ground. Their very existence proves that everything we taught was a lie. If compassion can build civilizations, if mercy can create power, then what was the point of all our cruelty? He stared at the screen, watching humans and aliens dance together on a beach half a galaxy away. They called themselves deathworlders, he muttered. They were wrong. They are something far more dangerous. On Earth, the music played on. Null finished his speech and stepped down from the podium. A young Veldran child approached him, clutching a small toy, too afraid to speak. Null knelt down to the child's level. He remembered being this afraid. He remembered thinking that every smile was a threat, every kindness was a trick. It is all right, he said gently. You are safe now. The child looked at him, then at the beach, then at the humans playing with children of a dozen different species. Slowly, carefully, the child smiled. And somewhere in the universe, the galaxy's oldest empire continued to crumble, undone not by weapons or wars, but by the simple, stubborn refusal of one small species to let the helpless suffer alone.